The stranger living in my walls, I never believed in those horror stories you read online. You know the ones. Someone hears scratching in the walls and finds out a homeless person has been living in their attic for months. I used to scroll past those posts and think they were made up for clicks. But I'm here to tell you that sometimes the unbelievable things you read online are absolutely true. And sometimes they're even worse than you could imagine. This happened to me 2 years ago in Portland, Oregon. I had just moved into this old craftsman house on the east side of town. It was my first time living alone, and I was so excited. The place was perfect. Hardwood floors, big windows, a little backyard. The rent was surprisingly cheap for the neighborhood, but the landlord explained that the previous tenant had left suddenly and he was desperate to fill it. I didn't think much of it at the time. I should have. I moved in on a Saturday in late September. The weather was just starting to turn. You know that feeling when summer is dying and fall is creeping in. The air gets colder at night and the leaves start falling. I remember thinking how cozy the house felt. How safe. I spent that whole first weekend unpacking boxes and arranging furniture. My best friend Maya came over to help, and we ordered pizza and drank wine and laughed about me finally being a real adult with my own place. Everything was normal for the first week. I went to work at the marketing firm downtown. Came home, made dinner, watched Netflix. The house settled and creaked the way old houses do, but I didn't think anything of it. I actually found it comforting. Like the house was alive in a good way. But then things started getting weird. It started with the food. I'm very particular about my groceries. I meal prep every Sunday, and I know exactly what I have in my fridge and pantry. One morning I went to grab the leftover pasta I had made for lunch, and it was gone. Just completely gone. I stood there staring into the fridge like an idiot thinking maybe I had eaten it and forgotten. But I knew I hadn't. I distinctly remembered putting it in a container with a blue lid and placing it on the second shelf. I told myself I was being forgetful, adjusting to the new place and all that. But then it happened again and again. A package of crackers I had just bought disappeared. Half a rotisserie chicken vanished overnight. Bread went missing. It was always small amounts. Never enough to make me think someone had broken in. Just enough to make me question my own sanity. Then came the noises. It started around the third week I lived there. I would be lying in bed at night trying to fall asleep, and I would hear these soft sounds coming from above me. Scratching, shifting, like someone moving around very slowly, trying not to be heard. At first I thought it was rats or squirrels in the attic. Old houses get that kind of thing right. But the sounds were too deliberate, too rhythmic, too human. I remember one night very clearly. It was a Thursday, and it had been raining all day. One of those cold October rains that makes you want to stay inside with blankets and hot tea. I was in bed reading when I heard footsteps directly above my bedroom. Not scurrying like an animal. Footsteps. Slow and careful. Heel toe, moving from one end of the attic to the other. My blood went cold. I held my breath and listened. The footsteps stopped. Then after a few seconds they started again, this time moving back in the other direction. I grabbed my phone and texted Maya. I think there's someone in my attic. She called me immediately. Her voice was full of concern, but also a little bit of that tone people use when they think you're being paranoid. She told me it was probably just the house settling, or maybe a raccoon. She said old houses make all kinds of weird noises, especially when the temperature changes. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But I knew what I heard. That night, I barely slept. Every little sound made me jump. I kept my phone next to me with 911 ready to dial. But the footsteps didn't come back. When morning came and sunlight filled my bedroom, I felt stupid. Maybe Maya was right. Maybe I was just being paranoid. But the food kept disappearing. I started taking pictures of my fridge contents with my phone. I documented everything. How many eggs I had, where I placed the milk, what leftovers were on which shelf. And sure enough, things kept vanishing. I would compare my photos from the night before to what was actually there in the morning, and items would be gone. Not in the trash. Not anywhere in the house. Just gone. I began having trouble sleeping. I would lie awake listening to every creak and groan of the house. Sometimes I would hear nothing. Other nights I would hear those slow, deliberate footsteps in the attic. Sometimes I would hear what sounded like someone coughing very softly, or the sound of something being dragged across the floor above me. I told my landlord. He came over and looked around, but he didn't seem very concerned. He said the same thing Maya did. Old house. Probably animals. He gave me the number for a pest control company and told me to call them if I wanted. But I could tell he thought I was overreacting. I did call pest control. A guy named Dennis came out on a Tuesday afternoon. He was older with a gray beard, and he had that weathered look of someone who had been doing manual labor their whole life. He went up into the attic with a flashlight, and I waited downstairs feeling both anxious and hopeful that he would find something to explain what was happening. He was up there for maybe 20 minutes. When he came back down, his face was neutral. He told me he didn't see any signs of animals. No droppings. No nests. No entry points. The attic was clean. He said sometimes houses just make noises, and maybe I should try earplugs if it was bothering me at night. I paid him, and he left. And I stood in my kitchen feeling completely alone and completely insane. That night I decided to do something stupid. I decided to check the attic myself. The entrance was in the hallway ceiling. One of those pull-down ladders with a rope. I had never been up there before. The previous tenant had left some storage boxes, but the landlord said they would be cleared out eventually. I pulled the rope and the ladder unfolded with a metallic screech that made me wince. Cold air rushed down from the opening. It smelled musty and old like stored cardboard and dust. I climbed up with my phone flashlight leading the way. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The attic was cramped. I couldn't stand fully upright. The rafters were exposed, and everything was covered in a thin layer of dust and insulation. There were boxes stacked against one wall like the landlord had said, but everything looked undisturbed. Normal. I was about to climb back down when my light caught something. In the far corner of the attic behind the boxes there was a blanket. A sleeping bag actually. Navy blue and crumpled against the wall. Next to it was a plastic grocery bag and some empty food containers. My food containers. The blue-lidded one I had been looking for. A bread bag. Cracker wrappers. My entire body went numb. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Someone had been living up here. Eating my food. Sleeping above my bedroom. Listening to me through the floorboards. I backed toward the ladder so fast I almost tripped. I scrambled down and ran to my bedroom and locked the door. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I called 911. The operator was calm and professional. She asked me if I was in immediate danger. I said I didn't know. I said I found evidence someone had been living in my attic. She told me to stay in my locked room and that officers were on their way. The police arrived within 10 minutes. 2 officers. A woman named Officer Chun and a younger guy whose name I didn't catch. I let them in and explained everything. The missing food. The noises. What I found in the attic. Officer Chin took notes while the other officer went up to check. He was up there longer than Dennis the pest control guy had been. When he came back down, his face was serious. He confirmed what I had found. Sleeping bag. Food wrappers. But no person. Whoever had been staying there was gone. They searched the whole house. Checked all the closets. Under beds. In the basement. Nothing. Officer Chin told me that it appeared someone had been squatting in my attic, but they were no longer on the premises. She said it happens more often than people think, especially in cities with homeless populations. She gave me some advice. Change the locks. Install a security system. Check the attic regularly. She said I could file a report, but without knowing who it was, there wasn't much they could do. After they left, I called Maya. She came over immediately and stayed the night with me. We didn't sleep much. Every sound made us both jump. We kept the lights on and watched stupid comedies on Netflix until the sun came up. The next day, I called the landlord. I told him everything. He was apologetic and said he would have new locks installed immediately. He also said he would have someone board up the attic entrance from the inside so no one could access it. I told him I wanted out of the lease. He said he understood. I stayed with Maya for a few days while I looked for a new place. But there was something bothering me. Something I couldn't let go of. Who was this person? How long had they been there? And most importantly, how had they gotten in? I went back to the house one afternoon when the locksmith was there changing the locks. I asked him to check all the doors and windows for signs of forced entry. He did a thorough inspection and found nothing. Everything was intact. No broken windows. No damaged door frames. Nothing. That's when something clicked in my mind. I asked the locksmith if there was any other way someone could get into the attic. He thought for a moment, then said sometimes old houses have external attic vents or crawl space entrances. We went outside and walked around the perimeter of the house. On the side yard, hidden behind overgrown bushes, there was a small wooden panel at ground level. It was painted the same color as the house, and if you weren't looking for it, you would never notice it. The locksmith pried it open. Inside was a crawl space that led under the house. And from there a person could access the area beneath the floors and eventually climb up into the walls and attic. It was like a hidden network running through the entire house. My stomach dropped. This person hadn't just been in the attic. They had access to the entire house. The walls, the crawl spaces. They could have been anywhere. I asked the locksmith to seal it immediately. He screwed the panel shut and said he would come back the next day with concrete to permanently block it off. I never spent another night in that house. I broke my lease and moved in with Maya until I found a new apartment. I lost my security deposit, but I didn't care. I just wanted to be as far away from that place as possible. But here's the thing that still keeps me up at night. The twist I didn't see coming. About 6 months after I moved out, I got a call from a detective. He said his name was Detective Morrison, and he was investigating a series of break-ins in my old neighborhood. He asked if I would be willing to answer some questions about my experience at the house. I met him at a coffee shop. He was middle-aged with tired eyes and a notepad full of scribbled notes. He told me that after I moved out, 2 more tenants had lived in that house. Both had reported the same things I did. Missing food. Strange noises. Both had moved out quickly. The landlord had finally agreed to let police do a thorough investigation. What they found made my blood run cold. Hidden in the walls between the main floor and the attic, they found a modified space. Someone had removed sections of drywall and insulation to create a livable area. There was a mattress, blankets, dozens of empty food containers. And the worst part, photographs. Hundreds of them. Pictures taken through the vents and cracks in the walls. Pictures of me sleeping, of me getting dressed, of me cooking dinner, of me sitting on my couch watching TV. The detective said they also found photos of the tenants who lived there before me, going back years. Whoever this person was, they had been living in that house long before any of us moved in. They knew every inch of that building, every hiding spot, every ventilation shaft and crawl space. I felt like I was going to be sick. The detective asked if I remembered anything unusual about when I first moved in. Any encounter with someone on the street. Anyone who seemed to be watching the house. And that's when I remembered. The day I moved in, there was a man standing across the street. I had noticed him because he was just standing there watching as Maya and I carried boxes inside. He was maybe in his 40s. Thin, wearing a dirty jacket and jeans. I remembered thinking he might be homeless. He stood there for a long time. I had even waved at him at one point trying to be friendly, and he had waved back. Then he disappeared. I described him to the detective. He wrote everything down. He said they were still looking for the suspect, but he had likely moved on to another location. He told me to be careful, to always be aware of my surroundings. He gave me his card and said to call if I remembered anything else. That was 1.5 years ago. They never caught him. I still think about it all the time. About how close he was. How he watched me through the walls while I slept. How he ate my food and walked above my bedroom in the dark. How he had been doing this for years and no one knew. But here's the really messed up part. The part that haunts me more than anything else. Last month I was walking downtown and I saw him. The same man who had been standing across the street the day I moved in. He was sitting on a bench outside a coffee shop. Our eyes met for just a second, and he smiled at me. Not a friendly smile. A knowing smile. Like we shared a secret. I turned and walked away as fast as I could. When I looked back, he was gone. I filed another report with Detective Morrison, but there's nothing they can do unless he actually commits a crime. He's out there somewhere. Maybe living in someone else's walls right now. Watching them. Waiting. So if you live in an old house and you hear strange noises at night, if your food goes missing and you can't explain why, please don't ignore it. Check your attic. Check your crawl spaces. Check behind the walls. Because sometimes the scariest monsters aren't the ones in horror movies. Sometimes they're real. And sometimes they're closer than you think. I still have trouble sleeping. I've moved 3 times since then. Each time to a newer building with security cameras and no attic access. But I still wake up in the middle of the night sometimes and listen to the silence. And I wonder if somewhere in this city, he's doing the same thing to someone else. The police told me I was lucky. That most people never realize someone is living with them until it's too late. Until something terrible happens. I guess I was lucky. But it doesn't feel that way. It feels like I'm still being watched. Like he's still out there. Like someday I'll look up and see him standing across the street from my new apartment building. Smiling that knowing smile. And the worst part is I'll never know if he's actually there or if I'm just being paranoid. If the sounds I hear at night are real or just in my head. That's what he took from me. My sense of safety. My ability to trust my own perceptions. So yeah, that's my story. That's what happened to me in that house in Portland. I'm sharing this because I want people to know that these things really happen. That the stories you read online aren't always fake. That sometimes the truth is scarier than fiction. And if you're living in an old house right now and something feels off, trust your instincts. Don't let anyone tell you you're being paranoid, because you might be right. And if you're right, it could save your life.